What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Talk. My name is Caleb Turner, and I'm a sports writer at KSL.com. It is January 12th. We are now a little ways into this new year of 2025, and I'm joined once again by our good friend, Nate Schwartz, who is back from his sojourn to Down Under in Australia over the last few weeks over the holidays. So welcome back, Nate. How you doing?
Oh my gosh, a great American welcome back from Caleb. I super appreciate it. Happy to be here. I want you to know I spent every waking moment of my time in Australia just thinking about the next opportunity to be on the show. And here I am. So thanks for having me.
And more than anything, I know you were thinking about our 9-win Utah Jazz, who now have 10 wins thanks to a game on Sunday against the Brooklyn Nets, who were right behind them or right ahead of them in the standings. However, you want to look at it, they have like the sixth best odds for the lottery, and the Jazz had the fifth best odds coming into the night. So it was a tanking battle at the Delta Center tonight, and it really played out like that. Some not good basketball for a lot of it. Ended up going to overtime, and the Jazz were able to come out despite kind of trying to tank at the end. It seemed like Isaiah Collier, so he got an 8-second violation, not throwing the ball in, but then he ends up getting the game winner. So interesting things going on there down the stretch for the Jazz. They won the game, but probably lost in the sense of a tanking battle.
Yeah, no, that's I actually was fortunate enough to follow along with this game tonight, or
Fortunate.
fortunate enough, is that the right word? What I will say is that like when one reads the headline, it was 110 to 109 overtime victory. I think that kind of conjures an image of what type of basketball game was played. Um, that is not the type of basketball game that was played tonight. I the one thing that I really want to highlight, and as you like so eloquently had identified, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, like kind of depends on how you're looking at the season. But the Jazz were outscored like 17-4 in the final 5 minutes of the game. Like it really was defeat out of the jaws of victory kind of situation there. And I don't know. I was sitting and watching the game, putting myself in the mindset of a diehard Jazz fan, which isn't my natural state. And I felt really bad. Like I was like, oh, this must be so tough for these people to watch. On the flip side of that, Collier, rookie pick, broke 20 points. He looked pretty good. So there's that.
Yeah, so I think one thing we were chatting about before we hit record was like we just didn't know a lot of the guys that were playing tonight. Like with all the injuries and on both teams, like D'Angelo Russell was just traded to the Nets, but he was not playing. Bojan Bogdanovic, a former Jazz guy, was also in street clothes for the Nets, and then on the Jazz, Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, Jordan Clarkson, like the list just goes on and on of these guys who were not playing. So when it gets down to who was on the court, it was rookies, right? Guys like Isaiah Collier, which is an interesting moment for maybe to like shout out some of these guys. I guess I know Cody Williams was the highest draft pick for the Jazz, brother of Jalen Williams from the Thunder. He had a really good game last night against the Suns. Jazz ended up losing that game, but then Collier has a good night tonight. And then another guy I wanted to shout out was Bryce Sensabaugh. He had a couple good games when the Jazz got their 2 wins on the road last week. So the Jazz are 3-3 in their last 6 games. So they're like a 500 team essentially over the last 2 weeks, which is very interesting. However, this was their first home win since November 23rd. So it's been a fascinating season, and so I'm curious to ask you, as when you put yourself in the shoes of a Jazz fan, there, were you rooting for the loss?
I personally, like,
Yeah,
now we are delving into personal basketball
right, right.
philosophy a little bit. I find it incredibly difficult to put myself in the mindset where you want to watch your team like have these short-term losses with the hope of having long-term success.
Yeah.
I'm sure that some people and many Jazz fans have mastered this art, but I'm not one of those people. It was a tough sit, tough watch. Congrats on the victory, or sorry on the loss. The one thing that I did want to mention before we jump to all of these other sporting events that happened this past week is one name that I did recognize playing this game was Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
Still in the league, still playing. Turns out, so that was like, like I actually had to check my phone when I was like, that's not. like Ben Simmons, is it? And lo and behold, it was. He plays basketball.
At one point, it's possible that I misheard this, but I think the Jazz commentators said that Ben Simmons is averaging like 6 points a game. Which man, like how the great ones fall, right? Just he was averaging triple doubles, what it seems like just a few years ago, and here he is on the sinking ship of the Brooklyn Nets. So
Yeah, getting beat up by Jazz rookies.
yeah,
So
exactly. Well, we'll see what happens with the Jazz. Like I said, 3-3 in their last six, but that could certainly change very quickly. Trade deadline is right around the corner. Guys could be shipped off. Guys could get injured. I know they've sent a lot of these rookies to the G League as well, so things could change. Because with this win, Jazz are kind of getting closer to being outside of the top five in the lottery as opposed to in the top five, which is where I think they want to be. Probably even want to be top three to get a chance at Cooper Flag, who, by the way, Cooper Flag's been killing it for Duke. He dropped like 40 points over the weekend and is just throwing down like insane dunks. He's looking more and more like just the runaway number one pick. So that's got to be tough to see the direction the Jazz were going to like have a really really good shot at him and then see a win like this on the weekend when Cooper Flag drops 40. Like it's a little weird.
yeah, that space that you're describing, that terrible but not terrible enough
Right.
to get the prize, is a really really tough spot to be in. So yeah, Jazz, please avoid being there at all costs.
And honestly, you know who is there at this moment is the Utah Hockey Club. They have been winning on the road but losing at home, and that's been carrying on. They have a 7 game homestand right now at the Delta Center, but they started that homestand off 1-3, four more games at the Delta Center in this homestand. So not great. They're kind of like I said, 500, right? They're kind of winning one, losing one. Which in the NHL and I guess similar to the NBA might get you into like barely into the playoffs. But then if not, you're you're outside the playoffs and you're in a bad spot for the draft. So it can be really, really tough there. But a little bit more on the hockey club as we go into our look ahead later. One of the other big win of the weekend, though, that I want to chat about is Utah State. The men's basketball team ranked number 25. I talked a little bit on last week's podcast about why this team should have been ranked prior to this week. Well, the day after that podcast was released, they were ranked number 25. So shout out to the Aggies, and they won both their games this week to move to 16-1 on the season. I think one of only 4 or 5 teams in the NCAA Division One to only have one loss, and that included the wins included a huge home win over Boise State with a 4 point game winner from Ian Martinez, which was just a great play. Did you get a chance to see that highlight play on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always really exciting for me when something local happens and it's being tossed around nationally, right? It's like, check out this insane buzzer beater by Utah State. I was like, whoa, okay, clicking in, right?
Yeah.
So it is really exciting that, well, maybe on the professional level, we're experiencing a case of
Hmm.
mediocrity, but at least on the college level, in outside of Salt Lake County, outside of Utah County, we are seeing a team execute at such a high level.
Yeah, and it was a really rough football season for Utah State. We'll get into a couple of their football alumni later on in this episode. But yeah, the basketball, I mean, I think they really are a basketball town when it gets down to it up there in Logan. The Spectrum is the venue that they play at, and it's just they call it Spectrum Magic. And that was a little bit of that last night. So good for the Aggies. Another couple other college basketball teams, BYU men's basketball has lost 3 in a row. They are 1-3 in Big 12 play, and Utah men's basketball. They broke a four game losing streak with a win over Oklahoma State. However, they are also 1-3 in Big 12 play. So it's a rough start for our two Big 12 programs in the state. Which, speaking of draft picks, Yegor Demon, who's on BYU, is supposedly supposed to be a top 5 draft pick. Hasn't looked that great since he came back from injury over the holidays. So we'll see if they can kick things into gear. The Big 12 is just a really, really good basketball conference. And so it'll be a bit of a learning curve, I think, for a lot of those guys.
Yeah, well, watching with both of those teams. Fortunately for us, it's still early game. Like we have time to figure these things out. But I mean, from where things are now for BYU and for Utah, they have a lot of figuring out to do. So hopefully, these ships are righted here soon.
And then lastly, the final college basketball team that I want to shout out is the Utah women's basketball team. They were ranked 22nd starting on Monday coming into this week, but they ended up losing their ranked matchup against number 12 Kansas State but we're able to bounce back with a 69 to 42 win over Houston. So good for them. As we head into our look ahead of the week that is coming up, Utah basketball versus BYU. Big holy war matchup on the hardwood coming up this Saturday, 7 p.m. at the Huntsman Center. So, like you mentioned, a couple teams that have a lot to figure out. Well, you can do it against each other in a rivalry game. Did you ever get to experience a BYU Utah basketball game, and what was that experience like?
Excellent question. I definitely had, but all of my BYU University of Utah memories. I attended BYU during that sweet period where I just feel like we never got a break. Like we were always losing. So I do know that the single time that I went to that matchup, BYU lost.
Yeah,
And then I think the other, like as we're talking about local teams competing against one another, the one that's most seared into my mind is when Utah Valley University came and beat BYU. If we remember that, that was also
yeah,
during my tenure as a
yeah.
student at BYU. So for everyone out there that's listening that has enjoyed BYU's success both in basketball and in football, you're welcome. I graduated, the curse broke, and just enjoy yourselves, have fun.
Yeah, there were a couple like pretty bad losses to UVU actually. One of the Marriott Center, but then also one in Orem as well. And shout out to the Wolverines. I haven't included them here in our program yet, but I believe they're doing pretty well. Like at the top of the WAC right now, or they're in their conference. So good for the Wolverines. Good for their basketball program. A lot of guys have kind of come out of there, moved on. Mark Pope obviously was their coach in BYU, now Kentucky. So good things coming out of Orem. But moving on from that rivalry matchup, the Utah women's basketball team has a quick Texas two-step road trip coming up this week to Baylor and then number 11 TCU, so another chance to be a ranked team there. Utah State only one game this week, so they'll have a pretty good odds to maintain that 16-1, move it to 17-1, playing UNLV on Wednesday. And then our two professional teams here, Utah Hockey Club, three more games at home on this homestand versus Montreal, the New York Rangers, and the St. Louis Blues. And the Jazz, just two games this week at home versus the Charlotte Hornets, and then heading down to Nolens, take on the Pelicans on Friday. So, not as many chances to mess up the tank this week, Jazz. You can take a bit of a rest and get those players healthy. And now we will move on to our winners and losers of the week. This is kind of an obvious one, as it is mostly or usually for these teams on winning streaks. The Utah State men's basketball team is, of course, a winner this week for their big win over Boise State, but also because they're just not losing games. 16-1 on the season, like I mentioned. As long as they keep on winning, I'll have to include them in our winners. I'm sorry to BYU and Utah fans. If you win games, you're a winner. And shout out to another Utah State guy, an alum, Bobby Wagner of the Washington Commanders, got a fumble recovery, a clutch fumble recovery, I might add, in the fourth quarter, in the Commanders' playoff win, on Wild Card weekend. So major move there for Bobby Wagner. I know a former Seahawk, so you probably saw a lot of matchups there with your beloved 49ers against Bobby Wagner. But
Yeah, wow.
yeah.
The sports theme of the night for me is pain, I guess. Yeah. Hated playing against Bobby Wagner. Very happy to see him in a jersey that's not a Seahawks jersey or a Utah State jersey.
Yeah, fair.
Um, and I watched this game. I'm a pretty big NFL fan, and I do think that matchup was far and away the best game
Yeah.
of this wild card weekend. And yeah, Bobby Wagner, I mean, he's been in the league for what, like 13 years or something like that. And he looked like a machine, just like an absolute monster while he was out there on the field. And so
His body type is like so insane. It's
yeah, it's almost
he
like cartoon character. It's like
it
Blitz,
is.
like the old
Yes.
video game.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's NFL Blitz.
But yeah, he looked fantastic, which is great that one NFL professional who went to Utah State had a good weekend. I think that we'll probably segue into the other here. Yeah.
Our loser of the week, Jordan Love. I'm so sorry to our cheeseheads out there and to our Aggie fans who are also cheeseheads. Three interceptions for the Green Bay Packers in a wild card loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. Um, just kind of a tough break. Obviously, going against a pretty incredible team in Philadelphia right now, like on both sides of the ball, they're pretty hard to beat. They're just fundamentally just doing some pretty great things. So hard to blame him too much. Obviously, I know he's coming off like an injury. They were saying last week he hit his elbow and he couldn't. He had the lost feeling in his hand, which seems
Not a
like a
good sign.
bit of a red flag for a quarterback. So I don't know exactly what was going on there, but shout out for giving it your all, Jordan, coming out. Obviously, you had a great run last year against my Cowboys, even. So you can't get them every year, and this year ended up being a three interception loss. So tough go there for the Packers.
I have a hunch that they'll be back.
Yeah.
I mean, watching that game, and the Packers fans who are listening notice, like those players, those Packers were falling like dominoes during that game. It got to a point where it was like actually pretty tough to watch. It was like, oh, who do they have left? So I personally, I feel bad for Jordan Love, but I also, as you said, I really don't think the full responsibility of this loss falls completely on his shoulders.
I think they had to put in a lineman that had never taken an NFL snap, which is not what
Yeah,
you want in a playoff game.
absolutely not. Yeah. So, we'll get healthy and, you'll get them next year, Packers.
Yeah. Any other big takeaways from Wild Card Weekend for you? Just overall, doesn't have to be a Utah guy. Just watched a lot of football, and some of it was good, some of it was bad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my big takeaway with has absolutely nothing to do with anything Utah focused at all. Is just like Josh Allen is a
Oh,
living, walking miracle.
yeah.
Like he is, if not the most fun NFL player to watch right now. I mean, he has to be in the conversation for top three. And his team just absolutely wailed on the Broncos, which I guess we could argue is
Well,
local, them
and
being like kind of the closest,
and,
right?
and Josh Allen went to Wyoming, so it's somewhat market, Yeah,
Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm justified. But yeah,
yeah.
that was my other big takeaway from Wild Card Weekend, aside from earlier tonight's matchup being the best of the weekend.
And I believe we're getting a Ravens Bills matchup next round. So I mean, possibly the two most entertaining players in the league, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But quickly coming up third, I would say is Jaden Daniels. Like he shout out to my our buddy Jackson Payne, Commanders fan. This rookie, obviously he was a Heisman winner, but to come in and do the things that he's doing as a rookie, he went to Arizona State for a bit too, so somewhat within our market too. We're just checking all the boxes here: Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado. We got all of you. Sorry, New Mexico, nothing right now, but maybe we'll get to you later. But yeah, I mean he's quickly rising the ranks of guys that I'll just like appointment viewing type thing. Like I want to watch what he's doing.
Oh, absolutely. It's having him kind of at the center of the Commanders' whole operation makes them really easy to root for. Like just
Yeah.
they have like this winning aura around them. And like the big line from their game was the doink to the divisionals, right? It was
Oh
like,
yeah.
it was you're standing up in your seat till the end of the game kind of situation. Yeah, but congrats to the cardiac commies, I guess.
Doinkin
Commies for Commanders. Yeah.
doinking in or doinking out. It's at that moment, like a split second, where you're like, ah. And honestly, I think it doinks out more than it doinks in, right? I've got to say.
Could not agree more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're not excited to hear the word doink.
Right,
You're
right.
you're terrified.
Yeah, pretty incredible stuff there. Well, to kind of finish things off here, I wanted to give a quick update on our soccer friends, since it is actually my full-time job to cover soccer here in Utah. Real Salt Lake begins their preseason tomorrow. And we got some news over the weekend that they lost their star striker, Chicho Arango, got traded to the San Jose Earthquakes in your neck of the woods, San Jose. But
Heyo.
that's 17 goals from last season, tied for a franchise record, by the way, leaving the team in 2025. So not exactly what you want, 2 or 3 days before the preseason begins. But there are some guys coming in as well. Sounds like over the next week, RSL is going to be active, kind of on the trade market and stuff, signing guys. And I'll have some updates for you guys as that preseason begins. I believe the Utah Royals, the women's team, also beginning things here later on this week. And both squads have players that are playing for the U.S. national teams right now, both on the men's and women's side. So Diego Luna, Emeka Anelli on the men's side, and then Ali Sentnor and Mandy McGlynn on the women's side. So check them out as well. Always cool when you get local people playing for the national team. Go USA. Any
Hey,
any any final thoughts, Nate?
yeah. Well, just questions as someone
Yeah.
who literally only knows three things about the sport of soccer. You say that RSL is they're entertaining the trade market, and that
Yeah.
can be a pretty exciting time for fans, right? Exploring and imagining the possibilities of landing someone great. My question for you is, if you were to assign a percentage of likelihood that Lionel Messi is coming to RSL, what percentage would that be?
Well,
Would it be like a zero?
it's yeah,
Uh,
it's zero. Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, I needed to ask. I needed to put the feelers out. I
Yeah,
needed to see if it
yeah,
was a possibility, and
yeah.
and now I know.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you want to watch Messi, you're gonna have to go down to Miami, or actually, I think it's technically Fort Lauderdale where they play. But yeah, they're not even playing against RSL this year. So some tough luck there for any Utah soccer fans wanting to see Lionel Messi. You might have better luck getting Ronaldo here.
Oh, there you go. You hear that, Christian? I know he's like a pretty devoted listener to this.
I
So
mean, he played
that's
for Real Madrid. It's not that far of a jump to go Real Salt Lake. So, in
so I have
fact,
a guest bedroom. He
yeah,
he can stay here if he wants.
yeah, you can stay in Mill Creek. Stay. They actually played. Real Madrid came here back in the early days of Real Salt Lake as kind of a partnership thing, like saying, "Hey, we recognize that you have the same that you copied our name." So,
There you go.
um,
An RSL fan can dream.
exactly, which you obviously are through and through, bleeding cl Claire and Cobalt.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I totally knew those were their colors even. So yeah.
It's basically just red and blue, but it's a fancy name for red and blue. So, alrighty then, everybody. Thank you for listening this week, and we will have more for you next week. Until then, we're signing off.